Hello everyone, this is Rebecca Power. I am the Interim Director of the North Central Region Water Network and your host for this webinar, and would love to welcome you to the inaugural speed networking webinar that the North Central Region Water Network is sponsoring. I think we've got all our speakers here now. Can everyone hear me? Just if you'd like to use your checkbox, let me know that you can hear me. Okay, great, good. As I said earlier, for those of you that have just joined us, if you haven't run the audio setup wizard and would like to do that, that would be great. That will ensure that at the end of our session during the Q&A period, we will be able to hear, you will be able to hear us and we will be able to hear you. Also, if you would make sure you know where the chat box is in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. That's where you will be submitting questions that you have for the presenters as we go along. And also make sure you locate the talk button, which is in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, just below the black video box. You'll be needing to use the talk button again at the end of the sessions during the Q&A period where to interact with the presenters. Okay, and I see Rick Klemme has joined us and looks like he's run through the audio setup wizard, so we should be good to go. And thank you all for joining us. I know we're very excited to have you here and to kick this off. Let me just go through a couple of slides quickly before Rick begins his presentation. So we're calling this webinar series The Current, and Rick is going to get into more detail about the purpose of the North Central Region Water Network, so I won't preempt him. But the purpose of this webinar series sponsored by the North Central Region Water Network is first to increase your access to excellent extension programming and research that may be useful to you in your own work, and second to increase our awareness of how extension is supporting effective water resource management in the North Central region. So, you know, there are going to be things that are going to be directly applicable to you in your own work, but also we want to expand our understanding of what extension is doing across the North Central region and see how that might fit into our state's work and into our own work in the future. The format for this webinar series, we're going to have 4 10-minute presentations with, as I said, questions and discussion at the end. All webinars will be archived on the North Central Region Water Network website for your future viewing pleasure or for sharing with colleagues that you think might be interested in this information. So please feel free to share widely if you got something out of this or you think some of your colleagues might. So this is a 7-part series, as I said. Our first topic, today's topic, will be managing water supply, resources for education, engagement, and research. And then the remainder of our topics are displayed for you there. So next month we'll have a webinar on decision support tools for nutrient and sediment management. The next one will be on social science applications in water resource management. Then we'll have a couple that are focused more on how we do extension programming and improving our ability to do programming, not so much focused on a specific water resource topic, but how we actually deliver extension programs. The number 6 will be soil health. What do we know and what can we do to help our constituencies think about soil health and do a better job at managing soil. And then finally, aquatic invasive species impacts and resources. So that's what you have to look forward to in the future. For today's webinar, we have 4 presentations. First, our Extension Dean and Director here in Wisconsin, Rick Klemme, is going to be introducing you to the North Central Region Water Network. Next, Gary Zoubek will be presenting on the Nebraska Ag Water Management Network, Improving Water Use Efficiency. Margaret Schneemann from the University of Illinois Extension will be talking about water supply planning and programming in Northeastern Illinois, and really applicable to water supply planning in many urban areas in the region. And then finally, David Lusch is going to give us a statewide perspective from Michigan, with looking at Michigan's water withdrawal assessment program and environmental approaches to large volume withdrawal management. Okay, on to our first speaker. Dr. Richard Klemme is the Dean and Director of Cooperative Extension, a division of the University of Wisconsin Extension. Rick is responsible for over 1,000 employees located across Wisconsin's 72 counties, 3 tribal offices, and 5 UW system campuses. Dr. Klemme obtained his master's and PhD degrees in agricultural economics from Purdue University and a bachelor's degree in economics and mathematics from Illinois State University. Okay, take it away, Rick.
How about audio only?
Okay, you're there.
Okay, I got it now. Back to video. I'm still there, Rebecca?
Yep, you're still there.
Okay, so the North Central Region Water Network, as you can see the tagline there, growing extension and research capacity for sustainable water resource management, was a project that has been in a genesis for a couple, 3 years under the leadership of the the Community Resource Development and Agricultural Natural Resources program areas. The work has been coordinated a lot by Rebecca Power and many of her colleagues that are part of the call today. I see many familiar names as I look down through the list. The network itself was predicated on a notion that we really needed to be more concerned about the value of water across the North Central region, across the country, and in fact across the world. As you can see from the 5 pictures on the slide here, the value of water transcends production agriculture into recreation, into tourism businesses, and into the general quality of life of our youth and our communities throughout the North Central region and of course throughout the country. There's a sense here that we really need to be talking about water in a sense of national water security. And so it's one of our most fundamental needs. It's woven into every aspect of our lives. And as you look closely at the graph that's on your screen right now, you'll see that water security connects to a number of security issues that you can read around the outside those 6 different items of water resources, food, energy, climate, human, community, and national security. We know the institutions function best when we're designed to address this network complexity, and we're not always proactive in making that happen. What kind of the bottom line here is that the institutions across the North Central region have varying degrees of capacity. Nobody has capacity in any one given area, so it's important for us to really look at that functional collaboration which occurs across state boundaries. This is a project which has a lot of history. As you know, the EPA regions for quite a long time have been working collectively and with USDA NIFA and the Land Grant National Water Program to develop a series of projects that are both coordinated regionally and facilitated across the country to improve both the quality of water and, as we've obviously seen over the last several years, the need to address the quantity issue as well. Since the 2000s, over the last several years, through the National Integrated Water Quality Program, we've built a nice foundation that involves a diversity of land-grant institutions, disciplines, and partners. There's connections that have been formed across state boundaries, across regional boundaries. The Committee for Shared Leadership and the value of regular collaboration between NIFA and the land-grant programs, land-grant universities on program priorities has been important as well. So the challenge is, though the program exists, the network function of the program is no longer funded. That's what led us to begin to consider the possibility of how do we in the North Central region develop regional collaboration, which brings the best of the participating states to the process. As you can see in the slide that's on your screen now, this really started almost a year and a half ago in September 2012 when regional water leaders developed and presented a concept paper to extension directors and program directors. It was proposed to have a regional planning process, development of a white paper for a new model of extension-led water programming in the North Central region and associated funding. You can see the timeline which has occurred. That following November, December, we have state delegates that were selected by extension directors come together in Chicago in December of 2012 for a two-day meeting to begin to lay out the North Central Region Water Planning meeting. If I remember correctly, I know that Rebecca and a number of her colleagues were involved, and we brought in Dan Hill, one of our community development educators from Wisconsin, to help facilitate the process and develop the foundation by doing some survey work, by doing some issues identification, to present a white paper to extension directors in April 2013. In what I would say for extension directors is nearly a speed of light decision making, we were able to, over a 2-year period, develop support for this and unanimously approve a 3-year pilot project that is responsible for pulling this network together under a lot of goals and objectives that you've probably seen or will see soon for the region across the 12 states for a 3-year period. The network goals, and Rebecca spoke to a few of those earlier. 1, increase connectivity and learning between university professionals and partners across a diversity of water-related disciplines and roles. Early on, I think there was a real sense that what this was really about is how do we coalesce partners into being competitive for large grants. I think the group very carefully considered that and decided that what's most important is that if you're going to build the capacity to compete effectively for large competitive grants, it's really important to make sure we have strong connectivity and that we strengthen networking and communication among those with primarily extension appointments and primarily research appointments. In that whole conversation was a notion of the ability for professional development across the 12 states, and learning became part of that first goal. I've talked about the second goal. Then the third group was to build the capacity of universities to address multi-state issues and opportunities. It's really where the element of synergy comes into this conversation. We all know that no one state has the capacity to address all of the issues related to water quality and quantity in and of themselves. We also know that this is complex interdisciplinary work, and it's very difficult because many times the subject that we're studying is, while visible, sometimes, not in others, in terms of groundwater, very hard to evaluate and measure in terms of the impacts that we're having on the natural resource and the associated industries and communities and lives around it. And then finally, to generate measurable economic, environmental, and social impacts in the short and the long term. Ultimately, if we're going to be successful with respect to the investment that the extension directors have made across the North Central region, we're going to have to be able to show a return on investment. And that return on investment is what that fourth network goal is about. So how are we going to do this? We know there's already been some infrastructure put in place. Rebecca has been selected as an interim director for the regional project. We've identified the state points of contact. We're building network staff. We're looking at building around the regional initiatives with the Regional Administrative Council and these state points of contact so that we would have seed funding, roughly $90,000 annually, to be able to begin to develop the frameworks for projects that we would be able to use in a variety of ways, and that will become evident as we begin to get the RFA out to you in terms of what we can expect to be accomplished with those seed funds. The notion of seed funds right away suggests that we're really looking to build capacity, partnerships, relationships, and the capacity to be able to go on to bigger and better things. The website, as many of you noticed, was launched just a few weeks ago. This is our first speed networking presentations. As you're capturing from the volume, the rate of speed I'm using, I'm really emphasizing the speed part of that. And we hope in July to have a North Central Region Water Conference. The state extension, the Extension State Water Coordinators, that was coordinated by our extension directors across the region, working with those who are engaged in water quality and quantity work. Many of these names are pretty familiar to those of you who've worked in this area for some time, and we have some new ones as well. And I'm grateful that, first of all 12 states contributed towards this network and worked aggressively to ensure that we had a strong set of state water coordinators who will then serve to reach out to water extension educators and hopefully researchers in their states to build those networks that we can then build on for regional programs as well. So I want to thank you for your attention. I want to thank you for your dedication to working on this important resource. The acknowledgments, obviously the directors, Tom Blewett and John Lawrence, Kathy Tweeten, Lois Wright Morton, the North Central Region State Delegates, and Rebecca Power have been very instrumental in moving this along and have worked for years in this process as well. And I thought I would highlight the regional representative of our states in the Final Four championship coming up this weekend. So all you can be Badger fans for the next week, we would appreciate it. Rebecca, I turn that back to you.
Great, Rick. Thank you so much. And just to highlight again one of the things that Rick said about the purpose of the network. So the purpose of the network really is to build the human capacity and the financial capacity to do great extension work across the North Central region. So all of those goals, and of course to have a positive impact on water resources and all of us that use water resources across the North Central region. And I want to, we have a number of our state points of contact on the call today, so thanks so much for being here. And also I think I saw a couple of our extension directors, Tom Kuhn from Michigan State University, and also Chuck Hibbard from University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So glad, thank you so much to you both for joining us. Okay, on to our next presenter, Gary Zoubek, also from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Gary has a master's degree in agriculture from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and works primarily in the area of water and irrigated cropping systems. His goal is to get the research-based information from the university to the people that he works with, and he's served on water quality and quantity projects and issues for a number of years. Most recently, he's been involved with two major efforts, one of which he's going to present on today, the Nebraska Agricultural Water Management Network, and also the Nebraska On-Farm Research Effort. So Gary, thanks so much for presenting today, and you're on.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity to share some of the things that are going on. I'm making this presentation on behalf of our coordinating team, Watermark, our irrigation specialists. Jenny Reese and Brandy Vanderwall kind of lead it. We've got a huge team of other educators that are involved, so it's not just a few of us. Why our Ag Water Network is important. Nebraska's pretty diverse in our agriculture. We receive a lot more rainfall on the eastern end of the state, less as we go west. And then this is a picture of the groundwater level changes in Nebraska from pre-development to this spring. And you can see we've got some areas where we've lost quite a bit of water, and our effort is to kind of stem the tide so that we don't have other areas that it's a concern. It was established, Nebraska Ag Water Management Network was established in 2005. Basically that year, Watermark and several educators toured the area. We talked about what are some of the needs, and our goal is to get the information from the university out into the people's hands. We wanted to foster some of the newer technologies and demonstrate them out in the field, and then enhanced our communication between the producers, the NRCS, the natural resource districts, crop consultants, etc. And at that time, our commodity prices weren't extremely high, and so we had to use tools that were pretty economical. We officially started in 2005 when SWAT and several educators worked and contacted the Upper Big Blue NRD, which is located, the county I'm located in. It's 50 miles west of Lincoln, and we asked them to cost share or provide equipment for 15 area producers. If the producers were going to use the tools, share the feedback, the NRD provided it. As a result of that initial effort, the following year, that NRD cost shared 50% on the tools, and it slowly grew statewide. Many other NRDs joined us in the effort, and educators and NRD staff worked hand in hand, working with the producers, installing the tools, helping answer questions, and that. It's been a voluntary program up until last year, and last year parts of the NRD did require producers to install at least one set of the some of the tools, and we'll talk more about them. But basically, we've grown from those 15 initial growers to over 1,100 of them. Okay, these are the two tools, Watermark sensors and Atmometer. The first tool, the Atmometer, basically it's kind of like a reverse rain gauge. We fill the PVC pipe with distilled water. We prime it, the suction tube goes into the ceramic top. We've got a canvas cover. It's a 54 alfalfa canvas cover that mimics the green, the color of the crop. Water evaporates out the top, and then we read the sight tube. A hot, dry day, we're going to have more evaporation. Cool, cloudy day, we're not going to have as much evaporation. And that gets us what we call a reference number. That, along with the stage of growth, is what we then use to estimate our irrigation. This is an example of the charts that we use. Along the left-hand side, we've got the stage of growth. Then along the top, we've got the amount of change that the ETgage may have done. And so, for example, if the ETgage dropped 1.50 inches and the corn was at V4, we would use 0.27 inches of water. However, if the corn was at V16, we'd use about 1.65. And so it's a quick way to help producers get a good handle on how much water their crop is used. You'll notice that there's a D in that quick chart. When we first started, it was what we call the Nebraska Ag Water Management Demonstration Network. After a few years, we're so confident in this that we took the D out, and so it's just the Ag Water Management Network. This is an example of the state of Nebraska. The red balloons are places where volunteers, NRCS or NRD or extension people along with farmers have ETgages, and the blue ones are automatic ones. One of the things that's really important is utilizing the tool. And so by asking them to post their information regularly on a website encourages the producers to kind of look at the information that they're studying and that. Basically, an ETgage alone can get you really in pretty good shape estimating what the water use needs are, and you could probably get by with it. However, working hand in hand, something to monitor the soil profile. The soil profile is kind of like the fuel in the gas tank. What we want to do is use up as much of that water that's in the soil and then let Mother Nature refill it during the off-season. And so the tool that we used in this case were granular matrix sensors. They measure the electrical resistance or energy required to remove the water from the soil. They're installed in the beginning of the year right in the row, and then you can use handheld readers, or we can use data loggers and that type of equipment to estimate the water. It's important to put the sensors in a representative area in a couple locations. Based on research that SWAT and other engineers have done, we also put together trigger sheets. These trigger sheets for varying soils will tell you what those sensor readings mean. The circle I have on this chart is an area where we've used about 35% of the water from that particular soil. If you have those kinds of readings, we don't like to get the soil drier than 50% of that depleted. So that's kind of a trigger. It's going to depend upon system capacity and soil type at what those numbers should be. Some of the accomplishments, the Ag Water Network has become one of the largest comprehensive ag water networks in the United States. Our network participants represent about 1.5 million acres of irrigated lands. Over the life of the project, typically our producers report an average reduction in irrigation of about 2 inches per year. So these value here is based on those savings. This chart is some of our web information. You can go to water.unl and the NAWMN and see we've got a lot of resources. We've got some videos. We've got our publications located there. The extension contacts are listed there, and all our publications. During this process, we've also developed a crop water app that lets you put in the soil sensor readings, and then it'll estimate the amount of water that's left and the amount that's been used. And we've had close to 1,400 downloads of this particular app. So, you know, and it's only been out for about a year. I guess overall, our water network water is a lifeblood of agriculture. It saves water, improves our profitability, and so we feel it's been a really great effort. When we started, no one was interested in getting the information at their desktop. Now that's the next step. Thank you.
Excellent, Gary. Thank you so much. And because these are speed networking webinars, the idea is to give you just a taste of the kinds of things that extension educators are doing across the region. Clearly, Gary's got a lot of experience and a lot of excellent information to share. I'd like to know more about how they got over 1,000 participants and over 1,400 downloads on those apps. It seems like in addition to being extremely useful for producers, there are probably some other things that you all are doing right. So feel free to contact Gary after this, obviously, for more in-depth information, and same with the rest of our speakers. They're just here to give you a taste of what they're doing, so you know if you'd like to contact them for more information. Okay. And Gary, Margaret, and David will be, of course, around for the 20-minute question and answer period at the end, or 15 minutes or so. With that, Margaret Schneemann from the University of Illinois in Indiana Sea Grant. She is a water resource economist with over 20 years experience in providing research, higher education, and outreach. She currently works with University of Illinois Extension and in Indiana Sea Grant programs, leading projects to create resilient communities and economies in the Great Lakes region. Schneemann holds a master's degree in resource economics and policy from the University of Maine. And it looks like Margaret has been dipping in and out of our session, so I hope that her connectivity is going to work for us today. So Margaret?
Hi, thanks, Rebecca. I hope everyone can hear me. I have been in and out of the session. As Rebecca said, I'm a water resource economist working with the University of Extension and Illinois-Indiana Sea Grant. And I'm going to talk today about my work with water supply planning in the Northeastern Illinois region. And I'm having a little trouble advancing the slide. Okay, so my work in this area began as part of a partnership with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning to assist them with development of the region's water supply plan. And if you look at this slide, we see the planning region, which consists of 11 counties located in the very heavily urbanized Chicago metropolitan area. This map shows our region's water supply source by municipality. The light blue is for Lake Michigan, dark blue is for communities on groundwater, orange is for our groundwater communities that have actually been approved to switch from groundwater to Lake Michigan water, and Kelly green is for communities on river water. You might think that our location next to the Great Lakes means that we don't have to worry too much about water supply, but due to growing demand coming up against our limited supplies, Illinois could actually require about 20 to 50% more water in the coming decade. So this really raises the question for us, how are we going to continue to protect our water quality while also accommodating the water demands of millions of more residents in this greater Chicago area by mid-century?
It looks like we might have lost Margaret. She, like I said, she's been dipping in and out. Looks like she's having connectivity issues. I expect that she will join back in just a minute here, so we'll wait and see if she's able to reconnect. In the meantime, Rick Kelsch has asked everyone to share which state that they're from in the chat box, if you all would be willing to do that while we're waiting for Margaret, just to see who's in the room, so to speak.
Hello, Rebecca, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Great.
Great. Sorry about that. So as I was talking about the regional and local water planning assistance we've been providing, so that includes the Water 2050 regional plan, as well as local planning assistance. And one example here is we developed an integrated water resources plan for the Village of Lake Zurich in partnership with other regional planning agencies. And so in addition to planning assistance, and what this did was really give us an idea of what the region's needs, barriers, and gaps are. A top barrier to water conservation being that really our water prices did not incentivize conservation in the region. Our stakeholders indicated that there's a need for education about paying the full cost of water. As full cost water pricing really provides us a means for our communities both to fund long-term costs to properly maintain and operate our aging water infrastructure, and also to promote water efficiency in the region. We also, as part of this process, had a survey, and that's the figure you see, the Northeastern Illinois Utility Challenge ratings. And what we found from our water manager roundtable was very much in keeping with the survey in terms of funding aging infrastructure being their top concern. In response to these assessments, I developed a full cost pricing guide. This guide really provided our communities with step-by-step implementation directions for full cost pricing. To date, we've disseminated this manual to over 300 municipal water suppliers in our region. We've also delivered training workshops and webinars to over 100 water managers. And again, if we could advance the slide, you can see me there delivering a training, and that's a high-efficiency water toilet next to me on the podium. And we've also done outreach to local decision makers in our region and state. So for example, an early outcome of our outreach has been that the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, which is the agency that administers permits for the use of Lake Michigan water in our region, is in the process of revising our Lake Michigan water allocation rules to recommend the adoption of full cost pricing by their Lake Michigan water permit holders. Another thing we also heard a lot from our community water operators and mayors as we were implementing the regional plan was about outdoor water use. And on the next slide, we got an image where we could really see that water use increases in our region 2- to 3-fold during the summer. And in our region, with, again, being heavily urbanized, we really see lawn irrigation being a large contributor to that peak demand. Lawn watering is also discretionary or non-essential use of our water. Some experts have estimated that over 50% of our commercial and residential irrigation water actually goes to waste due to evaporation, runoff, and overwatering. For our water systems, this peak demand is really driving costly water infrastructure expansion. So reducing this peak demand can reduce the cost of water supply distribution treatment infrastructure, as well as the associated wastewater and energy costs associated with providing that water. The need for outdoor water conservation really became acute in our groundwater dependent communities during the 2012 drought. We saw that we had several sub-regional planning processes happening, including the Northwest Water Planning Alliance, which was a sub-regional water planning group of drought-prone communities. That's 86 communities in our region. These communities asked Sea Grant to help with our outreach as they adopted endorsed lawn watering ordinances in their communities. And if you advance to the next slide, we can see one of the brochures that we developed for them to do outreach to encourage the communities both to adopt the lawn watering ordinance as well as to adopt a larger outdoor water conservation program that promotes a variety of practices, such as natural lawn care, that enables residents to maintain healthy landscapes while they comply with the lawn watering restrictions in place in their communities to help them become more resilient to drought impacts. One larger resource that I've been able to leverage in developing my programming and also bringing my programming across the states of Indiana and Illinois, also into Wisconsin, is a grant from the U.S. EPA Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. This grant really provided me the opportunity to build capacity within our program, to develop a program area that simultaneously meets both the GLRI Toxics Reduction Program objectives, and if you advance the slide, you can see the toxic program objectives of that grant, as well as water conservation program objectives of the Water 2050 plan. And this is because a lot of the lawn and landscape care practices that we're promoting that keep toxins out of our water also have significant water conservation benefits. Natural lawn care is one example of that type of practice, which reduces both nutrient and pesticide runoff into our waters, but also reduces outdoor water use by estimated about 30 to 50% over conventionally maintained lawns. And promotion of lawn alternatives and rain-friendly landscaping can reduce landscape water requirements even further. Of course, we are in a very heavily urbanized region, so we do have a lot of stormwater runoff, a lot of hardened landscapes, and so encouraging the capture and reuse of that water in the landscape helps a lot with our water conservation situation as well. On the next slide, with the Lawn to Lake program, I've been running this program for about 4 years. We've really taken a multi-pronged approach to target a range of audiences within the community, from lawn care.
Margaret, we're not able to hear you.
Can you hear me now, Rebecca? So, as I was saying, our estimated impacts on the slide include the weed and feed use reduction, pesticide and nutrient reductions, and also the water conservation reductions. And if you look at the slide, that's about 1 billion gallons per year. That's about half of 1 day of the Lake Michigan water use for our public water supply. So you can find out more information about these programs at our website and also contact me directly. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Rebecca.
Great, thank you, Margaret. If you're like me, I was curious to hear more about that last slide. So we'll get through. We'll go to David and then have some opportunity for questions at the end. But please remember to submit any of the questions that you have via the chat box so we can have those ready for our speakers. Okay, on to our next speaker, and David Lusch from Michigan State University Extension. I'm not going to read his whole bio there, but it's there for you to see the great work that he's been doing in Michigan for a number of years. He's a distinguished senior research specialist in the Department of Geography and in the Institute of Water Research at Michigan State University. He pioneered the use of GIS technology for groundwater management in Michigan as the lead author of the 1992 Aquifer Vulnerability Map of Michigan, the first statewide multi-layer vector GIS analysis ever conducted in Michigan. Dave served as the principal outreach educator for the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality Water Withdrawal Assessment Program. I'm down in the last paragraph there in the middle for those of you that are reading along. From November 2008 to July 2009, Dave presented a number of seminars across Michigan to more than 220 participants explaining the Great Lakes Compact, the Water Withdrawal Assessment Program, and the online Water Withdrawal Assessment Tool, which he is going to tell us more about now. So David, take it away.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. Thanks for sticking around at the late hour of the day. So I wanted just to tell you a little bit about the Michigan Water Withdrawal Assessment Program that has been ongoing here in Michigan for the last several years. It went into full-blown operation in 2009, but I'm couching it in a broader environmental context, which has sort of caught on in the hydrology, environmental hydrology area over the last decade, something now called in the broader context environmental flows, which on face value has to do with assessing or looking at the both quantity and timing of flow in river systems as they are supportive of aquatic ecosystems, and then ultimately as those aquatic ecosystems sustain services that people desire. On the other hand, the other approach is a water regime approach that is a regulatory approach, and the Water Withdrawal Assessment Program here in Michigan is of the second type, where we have attempted to figure out what the appropriate amount of water being reserved for ecosystem function is. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, as you'll see in a moment, and then that's what the regulatory program is built around. So as I said, we started in 2009 in earnest, although we had sets of legislation prior to that that sort of geared up for it with a few things that had to occur. Chief among them were data collection and data analysis to support this program. But in 2009, our legislature amended our Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act to provide for the implementation of the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River Basin Water Resources Compact, usually just known as the Great Lakes Compact. That is a contractual relationship among the 8 Great Lakes states where we signed up for doing certain things, and in our case this Water Withdrawal Assessment Program is our response to our responsibilities under that compact. And basically we're using the same structure and language of the compact. So you'll see that our legislation, now statute, calls for owners of real property who intend to develop a capacity to make a new or increased large quantity withdrawal. And that large quantity withdrawal phrase comes along with a number. We use 70 gallons a minute as a pumping capacity, but it's really based back in the compact at a use of 100,000 gallons a day use level. And note that our program is register it first, get approval, and then do the pumping. So it's supposed to be done prior to the withdrawal, not after the fact. So basically the law says that no person shall make a new or increased large quantity withdrawal from any of the waters of the state that could cause an adverse resource impact. On a conceptual basis, this has sort of been the law of the land in Michigan for many, many, many years, but the adverse resource impact had always been a qualitative, not quantitative statement. So what's new with the 09 legislation and the statute that came out of that, statutes that came out of that, is that we now have a quantitative metric, at least for the river systems. We still only have a qualitative metric for lakes. So for us, in Michigan, an adverse resource impact of a withdrawal is based on assessing how much a proposed withdrawal will decrease the stream index flow. That's a calculated amount, and the index flow that we use is the 50% exceedance low flow. So we take a 10-year time of record from a gauge, reach of a river, look for the median low flow in that 10-year record, and that becomes the index flow. All the streams in Michigan have been classified by the Fisheries Division of the DNR according to their temperature and watershed size, and each one of those 11 temperature watershed boxes in a matrix end up with a unique ARI limit. So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. So just quickly here, the left-hand map is the 11-part classification scheme for the rivers of Michigan. Basically, the red rivers that you see in several different line widths are the warm water systems. The green ones are the warm system, the transitional systems. The cold transitionals are in the cyan. There are not very many of those, so they're hard to find. And then the cold systems are the ones up north, the trout fisheries. More importantly, from a regulatory fabric perspective, the right-hand map shows the individual little tiny watersheds. If we were doing these according to a USGS approach, these would be the equivalent of 14 or 16-digit HUCs, if you're familiar with that hydrologic unit code approach. These are little tiny watersheds in most cases, and there are 4,490 of them that we actively manage throughout the state. There are actually over 5,300 catchments statewide, but 866 of them flow directly to the Great Lakes and are not under the regulatory fabric of the water withdrawal program. So here's what I mean by one size certainly is not fitting all. You see here the 11 categories coming down the temperature and size columns on the far left of this matrix. So the 2 sizes of cold streams, and then the 3 sizes of the cold transitional, the cool, and the warm systems. And I won't go through all the intricacies of it, just go to the cut to the chase, so to speak. The right-hand column is Zone D. That is the column that contains the limits beyond which registered users may not go. So these are the bounds for what causes or what we think will cause an adverse resource impact. And I'll point out that this ends up legally for the first time in the history of Michigan water law, giving Mother Nature and the ecosystem services that rivers provide, giving them legal standing in the case of balancing of reasonable uses of water resources. And it turns out that the way this has worked out, Mother Nature actually gets the dominant amount of water. So you can see as we read, these are percents of the index flows. So you can see in no case in Michigan is a withdrawal to take more than 24.9% of the flow. In other words, we are reserving at least 75% of the flow in every stream in Michigan for ecosystem service purposes. In the case of the cold transitional river systems, the second row structure coming across the page, we are even more restrictive, and Mother Nature gets 96 to 98% of the water in those systems because they're so sensitive to change. Now, if it's not quite clear to you as to why groundwater withdrawals should be so intimately connected with streams, I just wanted to come back to this graphic that USGS put out in one of their sustainability documents a number of years ago. And the essence of the problem here is that when you pump a well, the water has to come from somewhere. We cannot, the water budget is such that the three things that could vary are storage, recharge, or discharge. We can't really do anything on the short term about recharge. Most of the irrigation, large quantity withdrawal type pumping events come to a storage capacity, a storage utilization equilibrium within the first few minutes really of pumping. So beyond that, all other water brought to the surface for any use has to come from a reduction in discharge. And as you all hopefully are aware, in this part of the world, perennial streams owe their existence to the discharge of groundwater on a continuous basis to their wetted perimeter. So the idea is, if under natural conditions that you see in that top block, the stream had X amount of flow supported by this kind of a flow path in the groundwater system, and we put a well in and begin to pump it for any purpose, as long as it meets that 70 gallon a minute pumping capacity limit, then we will intercept discharge that would have gone to the stream, and the stream still gains, but it gains less. That's the B block in the middle. If we pump hard enough and long enough, and if the pumping event is close enough to the river, we can actually make the river into a temporary losing stream and pull water not only out of the groundwater package, but pull it through the wetted perimeter from the stream into the groundwater package and out the well. So this is why there's this intimate connection between groundwater use and index flows in rivers in Michigan. So that's a real quick overview of a very complicated program. I'll just call it quits here and let you know, I'll respond to your questions as they come up. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Excellent presentation. So I know we got started with the presentations a little bit late. For those of you that need to leave right at 4 o'clock, please feel free to do that. But let's just take maybe till 4:05 for any questions that people have for our presenters. And since Rick Klemme needed to leave the presentation, I'm happy to answer any questions people might have about the North Central Region Water Network. And if you do have a question, so I didn't see any questions coming through the chat box. So if you do have a question, please use the hand symbol just below by the names on the left-hand side, and we'll give you permission to give your talk permission. Any questions for our presenters? No? Okay. Well, that's fine too. These presentations, as I said, will be archived on the North Central Region Water Network website, and you have all of today's speakers' contact information right there on your screen, so that will also be accessible to you. Oh, I see a question from Pat Goggin. What is the process for making suggestions for other talks down the road? You can email those suggestions to me, Rebecca Power, rlpower@wisc.edu. My contact information is also on the North Central Region Water Network website, and just make sure to match your suggestions for presentations to the upcoming webinar topics that we have. And I'd love, thank you, Jenna, for putting my email address in the chat box there. And I would be happy to have any suggestions from people on ideas for presentations. All right. Thanks again to our presenters, and we look forward to seeing you at a future North Central Region Water Network webinar.